fatta minigam.
Charmcaster, I've been waiting.
Major jailbreaks aren't exactly easy to pull off, you know.
So last week I said that it was a pleasure to see Gwen stepping up into the role of a hero despite a lack of powers beyond what we saw her do against Hex last season with her established prowess in martial arts, but this is just asinine. A truth to the entire series, but let's be honest, it adds to its charm.
He's got a point.
For however convenient the plot device to this episode may have been, it was refreshing to see the limelight shift to her for a spell.
See what you did there?
And surprisingly, it was worked in at least to fuel our antagonist's involvement. And undeniably, this one is all about the women of Ben 10, because we're introduced to a woman who will become a long-time rival and equal to Gwen in Charmcaster.
Who?
You know how it goes here, but if you don't, here it is. We begin this escapade with the aforementioned Charmcaster, who breaks her uncle, Lord Aldermot, out of prison, previously seen attempting to murder a 10-year-old girl for stealing his stones.
What? What? What?
Who declares at this moment he's after another magical trinket. After the intro, Ben is given the assist to a group of wrinkly old beanbags about to tip off the side of a mountain in a bus, while Gwen reminisces about her short-lived period as Lucky Girl.
Oh, how unfortunate!
Ben returns and surprisingly says he wants a day off from the superhero shtick, and mentions that the walking fossils wanted to take him to a magic convention down on the fluorescent streets of Vegas.
Viva Las Vegas!
Gwen catches wind of this and, well, you can guess what happens next. We shift back briefly to Father Towson, who lights a fire and gives us the best 4DX experience when Charmcaster wishes to leave but is forced to stay until such time that her uncle is happy.
Excuse me, the fuck did you just say?
The next day arrives and Gwen is saddened to see that there's nothing genuine or authentic to the convention until she stumbles across a bunch of old doodads where she finds a wrist gauntlet with a stone embedded inside of it. It turns out that the stone matches up with the very same design seen in the 4DX experience.
Ooh, how convenient!
Then, as per frickin' usual, danger rears its ugly head with Ben having to stop a helicopter from crashing when an act goes wrong, and Gwen gets to experience the extent of what the gauntlet can do by saving Max in an impressive fashion. She later consults trusty old Google and discovers that the Stone of Beezer can enhance the abilities that someone already possesses, meaning her martial arts prowess and athleticism are dialed up to 11. They return to the convention, as if anyone would fucking do that after a helicopter's gone rogue, and Ben offers to be a performer for a magician on stage, planning to transform and freak everyone out as a prank. After he achieves this, he's assaulted by Charmcaster and Hocus Pocus Alakazam, to which Gwen then steps in her Lucky Girl persona. A rather long-winded battle ensues, giving us an idea of Charmcaster's knowledge. It ends with Charmcaster attempting to deceive Gwen, and Doctor Strange over here steals the stone from her gauntlet. Gwen then becomes distressed by this, but Ben encourages her to focus and figure out a means to stop them, as they discover that the stone can be used to also resurrect the previous charms that Gwen destroyed in Season 1, but the ritual can only be achieved from the highest peak in Vegas. The ritual begins and the gang intercepts them, with the fight ending as Wildvine shatters the resurrected stones and seemingly withdraws the natural mana from Grandpa Schlipschlap, Charmcaster, their staff, and the stone. Gwen retrieves the stone as a souvenir and puts it back in the gauntlet, with Hex and Charmcaster just disappearing, but Ben sweetly reassures her that she is able to achieve so much without her powers before and can continue to do just that. And then we close on her swiping Ben's hoverboard as the stone begins to reignite on her arm. So this week, the key talking points bring us back to Lucky Girl and her relationship with the doofus, not Gandalf and his captive, niece, and the fucking hoverboard. Where the hell did this go all this time? Apparently into the writing abyss, as I believe I read somewhere that the writers legitimately forgot this was a component they introduced in the show. Don't quote me on that, but if that is the case, that's fucking hilarious. And honestly, for however ridiculous this episode was, it was genuinely well structured. Admittedly with an abundance of plot conveniences like the hoverboard, but it was well written and explores the character growth that the show has desperately needed to stick with for some time, but oddly leans into some of that a little further here than normal. Primarily the relationship between Ben and Gwen, and that of Charmcaster and how they'll develop a connection throughout the seasons to come. The most poignant moment of this was Ben and Gwen's relationship, as I mentioned. It got some serious attention this time around, which helps as we move toward Alien Force, and they clearly have developed a stronger bond then.
You are my
There was a level of tenderness and sincerity shown from Ben, knowing how Gwen has felt all this time, and coming off the heels of last week where they argued over their shared interests and responsibilities, it leads me to believe that the writers were doing things backwards when releasing these episodes compared to where they all fit in, likely why there is a chronological order at all to this series that I was unaware of before now. There's a shift in Ben's perception of his cousin at this point, and it becomes that of mutual respect over her capabilities, until we see by the time of Alien Force that it's one of love for each other, as if they were siblings rather than cousins. Ben openly admits that Gwen's achieved a lot of what she does simply with her own wits and knowledge, which I've said countless times has always proven invaluable to Ben when his ego has tripped him up. And we'll see not far from this episode that Gwen's about to receive a major upgrade. I won't lie though, it was bizarre not seeing Ben soaking up that limelight for once. Now, from rising heroes to depleting zeros, who make a couple of attempts at obtaining power throughout the series, we have a returning Hex accompanied by his niece, Charmcaster, who, compared to Gwen, was being suppressed here and constantly mistreated, which likely leads her down the path we follow in this franchise, where her uncle deems her nothing more than a token witch, rather than respecting her understanding of magic and training her properly.
You fool.
We know who Hex is, but what about Charmcaster? A quick history lesson for those of you who are new here, but if I remember rightly, the story goes as such. Both Hex and Charmcaster are survivors from a dimension or realm known to the natives as the Ledger Domain, an environment we'll explore in Ultimate Alien, so spoiler warning I guess, but we discover during the gang's hunt for the Map of Infinity and the war against Agrigor, this was Charmcaster and Hex's home and where they were born. They ultimately had to abandon it due to one mystic known as Apoecha becoming consumed with power and destroying everyone in the land, which also took Charmcaster's father from her, and as they were forced into exile, they've been feeding off whatever power they can find on Earth. Hence why Hex had the stones around his neck initially in Season 1, and they were hunting for the gauntlet here.
It all makes sense now.
The gang can't hang around initially to support Charmcaster, but they ask for her help to get across to that realm. However, when they fail to stop Agrigor and upon their escape, she chooses to stay and figure out what to do with that realm. Things take a dark turn, however, when Charmcaster exercises her heightened strength and dominance over the realm and begins to build a machine that will take every life within the Ledger Domain to bring her father back. She succeeds in doing this, but it kills everyone in the land, including Ben, Gwen and Kevin, and once her father Dagon begins to see what she's done, he demands that she undo this and leaves. The crew are revived and leave a despondent Charmcaster there to grieve once again, but return shortly after to save her from being taken advantage of by Darkstar, and the rest I'll get into another time, but as you can tell, she's a highly complex young woman who has always struggled with war inside of her. She possesses strengths and abilities Gwen and others can only dream of, but is constantly switching between right and wrong. She's a tortured soul who had everything torn from her when she was young, and then her only father figure was that of a power-hungry old arsehole who took a Yondu approach and kept her for his own means. At this point, she is that to Gwen as Kevin is to Ben, someone we can return to on occasion in one of her misguided attempts to obtain power. It's not until they're in their late teens though that everyone starts to look at things differently, and Gwen chooses to try and save Charmcaster.
You didn't see that coming.
The only reason she becomes so corrupt again in the future is through desperation to reclaim what she lost in a moment of innocence. She's ultimately a tragic character, so we shouldn't really look at everything she does as strictly villainous, more of an instinct when she never knew any better. She's just desperate to survive and knows that her uncle will continue to hold her back and mistreat her. And from when we last see her in Omniverse, it doesn't give her any sense of a cathartic ending, so we better enjoy her now while she's here. After all that, let's assess the episode in general real quick. The pacing was decent, the energy was there, the lack of Ben's transformations was to be expected, but it allowed for Gwen to take the stage for once, which are honestly some of the more complex tales in this saga. The inclusion of Charmcaster, as you know, is a welcome one going forward, and actually asserts Gwen as a hero here, as she now has a mortal enemy. Hex was just a means to an end, and the gauntlet could have become an awesome addition to Gwen's arsenal, but oddly I don't think we ever come back to it. Possibly another case of forgetting what you'd written as a plot device in here, but whatever.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
The return of the hoverboard was epic, and generally this was a good time, if not, as I said, rather asinine. It's rich with lore when you look back on it, and once you know what becomes of these characters, you start to rethink what you believed them to be initially. Anyway, that's all I've got for this week. I appreciate you stopping by. Leave a like on this video as it helps get things around. Subscribe to keep up to date with all of my reviews, and until next week everyone, take care, and I'll see you soon.